this is for the one who ain't never had a love, yeah. This one's for the girl who don't feel like she's enough, yeah. Yeah, yeah, yeah. This one's for the cool kid playing on the school team, crying to himself cause he never had the prom queen. Head full of wants, but they said it's just a pipe dream, yeah. This one's for the kids like me, they ain't never had one day. The ladies always turn their cheek, but they ain't let the fat ones sing. This one's for the kids like me, kept working when they had nothing. When people try to take their dreams, they stuck it to them, please don't change. For the nerds and the misfits, bullied by the rich.
What's going on, everybody? Welcome to the Alex Cuesta Show. How's everybody doing out there on this Wednesday, July 2nd? We're in July, Dave, of 2025. How are you, dude?
I'm doing pretty well. I didn't even realize 4th of July was right on Friday. The days just slip by whenever you're doing things. I'm very excited to celebrate Independence Day.
It's nice that, we go from, in June, everybody was so graciously putting up their rainbows, celebrating the
No one was
the covenant.
actually.
They were
Oh,
celebrating the covenant. That's what they
okay.
were doing. They were celebrating, covenant and the rainbow and everything like that. And now we switch to America Month,
Yes.
where now everyone should put up, Star Spangled Banner in behind themselves for their profile pictures, which I think we will do as well. Because you know what? Damn it, America. And it's the 250th birthday coming up soon. So we have some really cool stuff there. It's nice to have you back this week that, we're adjusting to your little week swap and everything like that, because last week we did not have you with us and it brought a tear to my eye. But before we get to the fun stuff, wherever everybody is watching from, whether it's Kick, Rumble, X, Facebook, YouTube, we appreciate you all as always. Make sure like, share, follow, subscribe, all that good stuff. If you're listening to this later via podcast form, 5 stars is all you're allowed to give. Won't allow anything less. And make sure you leave a comment. So always Nate G coming in, hanging out, saying, what's up? What's up, Nate? How are you? But before we jump in with our guests, last week, Dave, I was solo and I talked to Will Truitt. He's running for Dutchess County Comptroller, so it was much more of a local thing for me. And I had a blast talking to him. I'm going to do everything I can here because obviously I'm running for office here in Dutchess County in my town. So Will and I will hopefully be working together closely with our campaigns and things like that. So it was a good show. I recommend everyone go back and give it a watch/listen. So, Dave, let's bring in our guest. This has been a long time coming. The last time we talked to this gentleman, I looked at it. It was episode number 42, September 14th of 2022. And he was easily probably our biggest guest at the time. When I asked him to come on, he was like, sure. I was like, oh, this is freaking awesome. Yeah. So let's bring him on in. He's a friend of the show. John Ziegler. He is the host of The Death of Journalism and With the Benefit of Hindsight. John, what's up, brother?
Good to see you again, Alex. How's it going?
It is going well. And, like I said, it was so long ago we had you on the show. We weren't live streaming then. It was all just audio, no video. A lot has changed since you have been on.
Well, obviously it was all because of my appearance.
It was.
Yes.
Revenue and everything flowed in after we had that. But so I actually want to ask you a quick question. I don't know how much, because you're all the way over in Cali, right? How much are you paying attention to what's going on in New York City with the mayoral race over here?
I'm paying pretty close attention. I talked about it on our most recent episode of the Death of Journalism podcast. So yeah, I'm very much aware of what's happening.
So one of the things that I'm starting to preach, and I want to see if we can get more people in conservatism to preach, is I know we're all focusing on Zoran Mamdani. That's the big thing. He's a commie, out and out, saying the most, Marxist type things that we've heard someone openly say in a long time, especially being majorly affiliated with the party. So everyone's focusing on him. And then I'm seeing a big wave of the ex-influencers, conservatives, coming out and saying, well, Curtis Silva should just drop out. And let's go support Mayor Adams because he's doing what Mayor Adams does and saying what he needs to say in order to stay relevant. Am I crazy, John, for thinking okay, Republicans, we have 3 candidates on the left are about to tear each other apart. Mamdani won a primary, which radicals come out to do. They support that, right? Cuomo looks like he's staying in. Adams looks like he's staying in. Wouldn't it be wiser to just try to lift Silva up and get a real push behind him to maybe sneak in while they tear each other apart? Or am I just in La La Land?
Yeah, I don't think that would work. And the reason I don't think it would work for 2 reasons. First of all, so your theory is that Silva could win a 4-person race, getting 27% of the vote or something like that.
Yeah.
Right. That's your theory.
Hopefully.
The problem with that is I'm not sure that Silva could get 27% of the vote, even in a head-to-head matchup. But let's pretend that he theoretically could. The second problem is that Mayor Adams is now so associated with Trump that they're going to be a certain percentage of Republicans in New York City that are going to vote for Adams because they see him as the Trump candidate. So there's no possible way for Silva to win, no matter how many candidates there are. So your choice is, do you want to put forward a Republican candidate who's going to lose and maybe help the communist win? To me, that might not actually be the worst scenario, because I'm not 100% in this camp, but I am currently sympathetic to the camp that basically just says, let New York City burn.
Accelerationist camp right there.
Yeah.
That this is the best scenario for the country, to see what happens when this kind of crap actually happens in real life, and make sure it never happens again afterwards. Now, that is not without damage and suffering, and I'm not 100% there yet, but that to me is not the worst scenario. The worst scenario is not having the rest of the country realize what a shit show New York City is going to turn into if this guy actually becomes mayor and gets what he wants.
I mean, but you have LA as an example. Karen Bass she's a big organizer. She's a well-known leftist. You have Ben Johnson over in Chicago. So it's not like we haven't seen these major cities.
There's a
getting
difference,
their
though.
comeuppance.
Not to interrupt you, but there's a difference, I think, in New York City. I live just outside of LA. LA is obviously a crap show.
Yeah.
And Bass philosophically is pretty close to what we're talking about here. She's not as honest about it, but she's pretty close. But there's a huge difference. I don't think people that haven't been here or live here understand how large the geography of Los Angeles is.
I've heard it's gigantic, because LA County's massive.
It's unbelievable.
Yeah.
I mean, and LA City is a smaller portion of LA County, but in the public consciousness, it's LA County, which is a massive, massive space of land.
Yeah.
New York City, as you well know, is an extremely small piece of land. It's an unbelievably small piece of land for the number of people that it has on it. And I've spent a lot of time in New York City. My father worked there when I was a kid. I've been to many, many events there. It's at its best a wonderful city. But here's the thing: if it collapses, it is so much more obvious to the naked eye that it is collapsing than what happens in Los Angeles. No matter how bad things get in Los Angeles, there's always going to be pretty pictures of the beach, and you're always going to have, places that look awesome, and there's always going to be able to put a lipstick on the pig type of thing, no matter how bad it gets. And you actually have to try to find the real shitholes where the homeless people are. In New York City, you're not going to be able to avoid it. It's going to be as clear as it could possibly be. And so therefore, in my mind, it would have much more of an impact. Plus, by the way, you get a way larger number of people passing through that city, than you do Los Angeles.
Well, the UN is right there too. So the UN having, can I just plead my case to you as a friend then?
Sure.
I live in New York State, and what goes on in New York City will directly affect me. So because
I understand. That's why I'm not 100% there. I get it. I get that it's not without damage, and there, I understand. It's not the best scenario. I'm saying
we get what we vote for, though.
I'm saying it's not the worst scenario. And if you said to me, what's the plan to beat him in this general election? To me, I haven't seen numbers yet to back this up, but my instincts would be, if I could magically get Silva to withdraw and I would rally Republican support around Adams, and then Cuomo would actually siphon off the semi-rational Democratic vote, I think he would be in trouble. I think he would have I think Adams would probably be favored under that scenario.
That's the most plausible scenario of beating him, I think.
I agree with you.
Do you think that we could bully Adams enough to keep him from being destructive? Because it's not like he doesn't share some of the same views as Mamdani.
But he's nowhere near as close, though. That's
he hides it better. He hides it better. Like
Well,
he's not the guy's not a conservative.
He's
by any
also
shape or-
no,
he's not a
hold on.
conservative, but he's not Mamdani. That's the thing. Like, I mean, we
Not
watched
close.
a video of him going through a kid's bedroom
true.
just in case.
That's
Like,
true.
the guy at least has some values there that we can
Plus
hopefully keep.
Trump has leverage over him.
That is
I
true.
mean, which
true.
I think is important, at least for the next couple of years.
Yeah, at least
So-
until the midterms. If the
Right.
midterms
So-
flop, then Adams is going to do what he wants.
Well, I mean, look, you're never gonna get another, Rudy Giuliani or something back in Rudy's
Pipe dream.
heyday.
At least not for a while.
So to me, if you want to try to salvage something here, the scenario is to rally around Adams and try to get rid of Silwa. And actually, I think you need Cuomo to stay in to try to help get rid of some of the support that will never vote for Adams because he's associated with Trump. I mean, Trump impacts everything.
Oh
And
my God.
and his fingerprints will be on this race as well.
It reminds me of one of the recent SNL skits, because SNL is actually being semi-funny sometimes now, where it was like they were faking as like the talking heads from CNN, MSNBC all being together, and they're like, we're gonna stop making everything about Trump. It's ridiculous, and blah blah blah. And then all of a sudden, a Trump alert comes at the bottom, and like, Trump just tweeted, I saw a duck, and like something ridiculous. It was actually surprisingly funny for SNL to do, but now they feel safe to do it because they know there isn't a golden goose in the White House to protect.
I do want to bring up Nick commenting, don't act like you don't eat a burger and fries with your hands. I don't know if you've seen these arguments.
Beans. Wasn't it beans that he ate with
No,
his
he
hands
was
or
eating
something?
rice. But the argument that people were making in defense of eating rice with your hands is that we eat burgers and fries with our hands. Just a nonsensical argument, but it's something to throw out there. And some people will be like, especially if they're on his side, they'll be like, oh, yeah, you eat those with your hands. Why can't he dip into messy rice with his hands and eat it?
I mean,
These are the big questions.
these are the important ones that are going to get him elected and everything. So, all right, let's jump off of New York City. I'm getting depressed. Let's go into something that I feel like unintentionally has became your life's work. Because as we talked to you in the past, you started off your work, with the benefit of hindsight about the Jerry Sandusky trial, going in there not to prove that he was innocent, but to basically find out what the hell was going on and, Joe Pa's involvement and Sandusky, and actually dig in what happened and maybe find out more of what he did. And so give us a synopsis of first, what happened when you dug into the Sandusky case for those that don't know. And if you want to know in detail, go to his podcast with the benefit of hindsight. Dave and I both listened. It's one of the best podcasts you will ever listen to. It is really well done. You guys do a fantastic job with it.
Well, thank you. I agree with you that it's a great podcast. My co-host on it is a woman by the name of Liz Habib, who's
also been a guest on the show.
Liz is a longtime television sportscaster here in Los Angeles, and she's now actually a fairly high-ranking member of the Trump administration. And she was someone who was very much opposed to my point of view when we began this investigation many, many, many years ago. It's been 13, 14 years since this story first broke. And just to give you the very short version of this, I have no connection to Penn State at all, although I grew up in the suburbs of Philadelphia. I went to school at Georgetown University, and the story, as we were told about it in November of 2011, and became the biggest sports scandal of the century so far, without even really a question, never made any sense to me, especially from the cover-up perspective. That just the math didn't even math. It didn't come close to adding up.
And quickly, I want to add a caveat. John is incredibly good about sniffing out bullshit. He's really good at it. So there's even times where I'm watching John on X, and if you're not following him on X, I'll put it up right here. Sigmund Freud, if you want some good takes, you may disagree with John. And there's times where me and John, I read it. And we've had some spats every once in a while and some fun DM exchanges. But if John has an inkling about something, take it serious, because he doesn't go into it half-assed. It's not just a hunch. He has very good backing behind things. So there's even times I'm looking and I'm like, might not agree with it, but John friggin' said it, so there's a chance it's true. So you're
Well,
really
thank
good
you
at
for that, Alex. I really appreciate that because I do think, well, I have a lot of weaknesses. I think my greatest strength is that I do have a finely tuned BS detector. And I think that
Yes.
my batting average, especially on Twitter, when it comes to sniffing out bullshit, is probably higher than anybody else's that I'm aware of. And I don't think that's a brag. I think that's a fact. So when I had that sinking suspicion that something was amiss in the whole Penn State Joe Paterno Jerry Sandusky case, it was mostly from the perspective of the Joe Paterno Penn State cover-up.
Yes.
And then after a couple of years of investigating this and getting deeply, deeply embedded in the story and interviewing Sandusky in prison not once but twice for a total of over 6 hours, and going on the Today Show with Matt Lauer not once but twice, the second time with his wife Dottie Sandusky, I finally came to the conclusion that the only way to make this story make any sense at all is for Jerry Sandusky, believe it or not, to be completely innocent of the allegations against him. And oh, by the way, it's not even close. That's the part of this story that is so astonishing. It's not that he's innocent, which is crazy enough for people to accept if they haven't followed the case.
Yeah.
It's not close. It's not even a situation where I ever worry about, boy, did I get this one wrong? And every objective person, and there have been many, who has looked into this have all come to exactly the same conclusion. This is the ultimate, and it's a bad metaphor because of the nature of the allegations, but this is the ultimate, the emperor wears no clothes story, right? Where it's clear that this is a bullshit. It's clear this is a bullshit story.
Yes.
It's obvious, but yet nobody was stupid enough until me to come forward and say, hello, this story is absurd. There's no evidence for it. There's no logic for it. And just to finish this off, because I'm a big believer, guys, in the concept that you got to follow a story after it is supposedly over to know what the real truth is. I mean, like, to me, you find out the truth of things after a presidential election, or after a divorce, or after a firing, or after a criminal trial, like with OJ, not giving a damn about finding the real killer, that type of thing. You find
he was going to find him eventually. Don't worry.
And then if I did it, I'll write a book about it, let you know what I would have done if I did it.
I mean, and to me, using that philosophy on the Jerry Sandusky case, there's no chance that he was guilty of any of this. I mean, I can give you a litany of like 12 things that should have happened that have not happened. And including, by the way, his wife never divorcing him. None of the Penn State administrators ever had their wives divorce them. By the way, the so-called heroes all got divorces. The victim one got a divorce. Mike McQueary, the assistant coach, who was the witness allegedly, he got a divorce.
And aren't they all still massive Penn State fans?
Oh, all the accusers are massive.
Incredible.
No, all the accusers are huge Penn State fans. They all use their millions of dollars from Penn State to either buy fancy sports cars or Penn State season tickets, or both. And look, you have to trust me and you guys who have listened to the podcast. This is as deep a dive as you're ever going to possibly ask for. This is not a situation where we're dealing with, big picture stuff. We get into the nitty gritty details of this. We've interviewed dozens of people very close to the case, and it's not even close. And just to finish off the idea of, okay, well, where are we? Serial pedophiles all plead guilty, all of them. And Jerry Sandusky never even engaged in a plea bargain. He never pled guilty. He's still appealing literally to this day. Now, he's appealing stupidly because he's appealing in the state of Pennsylvania, which is deeply, deeply invested in the idea that he is guilty. And all the judges in Pennsylvania are elected. And so there's zero chance of him ever getting justice in Pennsylvania. I have tried.
And you talked about him being very scared about taking this up to the higher federal level.
Exactly.
Right?
I thought a couple of years ago that I had convinced Jerry Sandusky to ditch the state appeals and go with a federal appeal. because I think that an objective federal judge, by the way, even if Jerry Sandusky was guilty, which he's not, an objective federal judge would look at his trial and go, what the flying fuck was this? And I am being completely sincere. This was the Salem witch trial on steroids, okay? Even if he was guilty. But the problem is you only get one bite of the apple in federal court. And if you lose there, you can't go back to state court. It's all over. And I think that Jerry, he's in his 80s now, by the way.
He's 81, yeah.
He's going to have open heart surgery in prison in a few weeks. So, I mean, who knows how much longer he has to live. But I think he's terrified that if he loses any opportunity to appeal, that he'll just lose the will to live. And I can understand that. But to me, it's very frustrating, not just because I know he has no chance in state court, but also because I would just personally love for an objective, knowledgeable federal judge to have a look at this, because it is just an absolute joke. And it's really this is the kind of case. This is literally the kind of case that you have federal appeals for.
Exactly.
Because you cannot get justice in a local jurisdiction or a statewide jurisdiction when literally the entire state was invested. When I say the entire state, I'm not just talking about the population. I'm talking about the media. I'm talking about the State University of Pennsylvania. I'm talking about the governor of the state, who was the attorney general when this case was first investigated. The entire attorney general's office, prosecutors up and down, all the judges that looked at this and denied the appeals. I mean, there's almost nobody in the state that does not have a vested interest in keeping Jerry Sandusky in prison. It would
so they must like you in Pennsylvania a lot.
It's almost like a founding myth of theirs now, where it's something like, no, this guy is guilty. We did the right thing, and if we didn't do the right thing, then that whole foundational myth is screwed up for it.
Is that
Dave?
something that
I love
Shapiro,
that. I love that founding myth idea, because that really that's really what it is. It's almost part of the state motto now.
Yes,
I mean, Jerry Sandusky is guilty, and so you can't go back. There's no way to go back now. And because otherwise you're going to look like complete idiots. And there's too many people with too much to lose. And I'm not, as you guys know, I'm an ardent anti-conspiracy person. This is not a conspiracy theory. In fact, I believe that the people that think that Jerry Sandusky was guilty and that Penn State covered this up, they're the conspiracy people. They're the ones that are completely out to lunch and have a conspiracy theory that makes no sense whatsoever. I am not alleging a massive conspiracy. I'm alleging a perfect storm of perverse self-interest. And that's what transpired here. And that's what continues to be the case today. And so my guess is that Jerry will keep appealing in Pennsylvania State Court until he dies. And then that will be the end of it. And it's
that's just so sad.
It's taken a lot out of my life and a lot of other people's lives. That's for sure.
Nate G coming in said,
got the wrong one.
When that stuff happened, I was baffled Penn State didn't get the death penalty. I mean, they got close enough, though. They were beaten for up until Franklin basically got there and started to push them out of there. But that's
an important part. That's an important part of the story, though. See, Nate, I presume, was duped like everybody else was. That, my God, if Penn State is pleading guilty, it must be real. Penn State was only pleading guilty because they were terrified of getting the death penalty. The reason why they brought down Joe Paterno's statue was because the NCAA intimidated them into doing so.
I'll say this, Nate and Caveat, go listen to With the Benefit of Hindsight. Nate, I know you would freaking love it. Nate's on here all the time. Caveat's on here, especially Nate. Caveat, I think you would like it too. Go listen to that podcast. When I tell you, you're going to go in there like I did, like Dave did, going, I think John's a little fucking crazy. I don't know if this is true. I'm going to go in there. Like, I'm going to try and give it an open mind. And, it was after, I listened to a bunch of it. I didn't get to finish it before I had you on the first time. And then I finished it fully. And you definitely, like, even if you walk away not convinced that Sandusky's innocent, you're sure as hell not convinced anymore that he's guilty. Like, it is.
But let me just add one more thing, though. See, a lot of these true crime podcasts, which I actually despise,
Yeah.
they poke hole they poke holes in the case and they create reasonable doubt. And a lot of times, by the way, the person that they're trying to get out of prison is actually guilty as hell. In fact, some of the more prominent true crime podcasts are essentially frauds, which drives me crazy. Like the Making a Murderer guy, that guy's guilty as crap. But I don't just poke holes in the conventional wisdom. I portray and I delineate an entirely different scenario that I believe is far more plausible and far more in keeping with the evidence than the fairy tale, the dark fairy tale that we were told. So it's not just I break down the problems or the potential doubt about the conventional wisdom. I provide a completely different story, which I'm, in theory, I'm not even required to do if I'm trying to show somebody didn't get a fair trial. I have my story, my scenario here is far more plausible, makes way more sense than what we were told and what everybody bought, including the sports media and the news media, which played a huge role in this. I mean, ESPN played a massive role in why this story went down the way they did. And by the way, going back to my theme of what have we learned since? What have we learned about ESPN in the last 13, 14 years? They're a bunch of super woke, not credible reporters who will buy into false narratives all the time if it fits their agenda. And that's what happened in this case with ESPN.
And it's one of the best parts about listening to it. So Nate, I'm going to get to your comment in a second, but anyone that goes to listen to it is hearing Liz from the first episode to about the middle, because she is your biggest critic in the beginning, and she is doing her best because she believed it, right? Coming into there, she believed this whole Sandusky stuff, but she's an open-minded, fair, and objective person. So she came into this, and hearing her trying to question you and giving you some really good things to think about at times too with her questions, I think helped round you out as well and make your whole case about this better. But also hearing her slowly come to the point where she's like, he has to be innocent. It was like that also like pulls you along, because everybody starts off as Liz. Everybody starts off as Liz, and we get pulled through the same exact whole entire.
Well, thank you for saying that as well, Alex, because that was my entire idea. Liz and I, as you probably know, worked together in television sports. Actually, she was in news at the time. I was in sports many, many years ago in the early 90s at an NBC affiliate in Steubenville, Ohio, Wheeling, West Virginia. And so we'd known each other on and on for a very long time. And she's a Pitt grad, so she has no love for Penn State. She had totally bought into the narrative. And I wanted exactly what she did. I wanted her to come along for the ride because I had enough faith in my ability to convince her and persuade her, and in her open-mindedness and her intelligence, that she would figure it out. And frankly, that part of it probably went better than I even expected, because at the end, she is an absolute advocate for Jerry Sandusky's innocence. Yeah, no, it was just awesome to hear it and just the way it went down. So how often do you talk to Jerry Sandusky now? I don't talk to Jerry hardly at all. We exchange email from time to time. There's a lot of reasons why we don't communicate. One of which is that there's been a little bit of tension between us, partially because of this appeal issue. I'm frankly pissed off at him and have given up a little bit because of his insistence on appealing in state court. But also, in my opinion, he and his wife Dottie, as well as some other people surrounding him, have been effectively duped into trusting a guy that they should not be trusting, a guy by the name of Frank Parlato, who is an investigator who's taken over this case over the last couple of years and done some good things. I loved his energy and loved his determination. He has somewhat of a track record, although he also has a conviction on federal tax evasion charges from a couple of years ago, which is not real good. But my experience with Frank has been really bad. Most interestingly, just a few weeks ago, he and I interviewed one of the trial accusers of Jerry Sandusky for over 2.5 hours. Now, I say we interviewed this person. It was actually accuser number 10, Ryan Rittmeyer is his name. And this was the first time that I had ever interviewed one of the trial accusers of Jerry Sandusky. Now, I had tried to interview trial accusers many times, but I had always been rebuffed because they were afraid of me in various situations. And victim one, Aaron Fisher, actually threatened to kill me with his truck. So it's not because I wasn't trying, but I thought the interview was fascinating and very enlightening. And I thought that it was very clear at the end of the 2.5 hours plus that Ryan Rittmeyer was never abused by Jerry Sandusky. But Frank is objecting to me making that interview public. And I had agreed before the interview, in an effort to have the interview actually happen, that Frank and I would mutually agree on how and when to disseminate the interview. Well, I was naive. It's clear to me Frank never had any intention of allowing the interview to be made public. I'm not sure why. I have my theories as to why. There were many strange parts about the interview, one of which was Frank barely participates. After, I think he asked one question or chimed in one time, and it was actually to defend what I thought was an insane statement by the accuser, because the accuser had started to compare himself to being a lottery winner. I had asked him about him losing I had asked him about losing his money that he got from Penn State. He had received personally over $3 million from Penn State because of his accusation against Jerry Sandusky. And he basically said, this is almost word for word. He says, well, I did lose all my money, but, I didn't lose it as fast as many other lottery winners do. Like he had thought about this and researched it, and he was actually proud of the fact that it took him several years to lose the $3 million plus, but he referenced comparing himself to a lottery winner. Well, when I heard that, I'm like, whoa. Hold on a second. And then so I say, are you saying that you think of yourself as a lottery winner? And he's like, da, 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 da. And Frank jumps in like he's his defense attorney to try to explain what he really meant by that. And so anyway, I don't get Frank Perlato. I don't trust Frank Perlato.
I feel like you could be very intimidating when it comes to things like this, though, in this case specifically, because you probably forgotten more about this case than Frank knows, because you've been working on it for so long. So for him to be the representation now and have you come in there, it's like, I could imagine, because he doesn't get,
that's possible. You know what, Alex, that is possible, because I have been astonished at how little Frank really even knows about the case, like even basic things. But I'm more concerned by some of the things that Frank has done, for instance, with this particular accuser. And I've not talked about this publicly other than on my podcast. But I think you guys will find this amazing. So this is this accuser number 10, Ryan Rittmeyer. We're close to getting a full recantation of his trial testimony, which in the real world would be a huge deal.
Yes.
In the Jerry Sandusky
Headline
case,
news.
Right. In the Jerry Sandusky case, not a big deal, because there's a completely different standard. But here's the problem. So number one, he hasn't fully recanted. He's only recanted like 90% of his story, and he's holding on to this. he's holding on to this fig leaf of one abuse episode, because I think he's afraid of maybe getting some sort of culpability, either criminally or civilly, for his trial testimony, or having Penn State come after him for money, or I don't know what it is. But it's clear to me, having interviewed him for 2.5 hours plus, he was not abused by Jerry Sandusky. And my guess is he's probably told Frank this, but he's just never done it on the record, as far as I'm aware. But here's the problem. And I can't even believe this is real. But this guy, Ryan Rittmeyer, has signed an affidavit that sounds really good, except it doesn't include the one part where he's still hanging on to this fig leaf accusation. But in the affidavit, Frank has in there the agreement they have that Frank will pay him significant amounts of money to participate in a documentary film about the
God.
case.
Oh,
Now, right there, I'm like,
Oh,
game, set, match.
Yeah.
You've just contaminated him.
yes,
But
yes.
it actually gets worse, guys. It gets worse. You're not going to believe this. Not only does he have it on record that he's going to pay this accuser has been living with Frank for over 2 months in his Florida Keys house while he's been trying to convince him to recant his testimony. It gets even worse than that.
no, it can't. It can't.
No, it gets worse.
Oh my God.
While living with Frank in the Florida Keys, Ryan, who's married and separated, has been dating the daughter of Frank Parlato's girlfriend. So Frank has contaminated this accuser as thoroughly as is even humanly possible.
Yeah.
So even if this accuser come out and recants, all they have to do is point to everything you just said, and they're going to be like, "It was coax. This is over. It doesn't."
I know.
This accuser has no credibility because Frank's
I
making
understand
them
that.
say this.
Trust me,
What the
I
fuck?
understand that.
Yes.
It makes me want to blow my brains out. I get it. And
Oh.
that's partially, by the way, why I was brought in, because I don't have any of these conflicts of interest with Ryan. I can say whatever I want to him, although I was restricted to a certain degree in what I was supposed to ask. Shockingly, that didn't really restrict me that much. But
You never.
and I think I got to the bottom line of the whole thing, which was this guy was never abused. And I think my gut tells me that Ryan is eventually going to fully recant. But to your point, that's not going to have nearly the legal or the PR power that it should have. Now, Frank, to his credit, has done some things in another accuser's case that came really close, I think, to being a legitimate bombshell. And that is that, trying to cut this story as short as possible, the mom of victim number 9 or accuser number 9, Sebastian Payden, who was the most salacious of all of the accusers, the one who most notably was in the basement screaming in the bloody underwear, and his allegations were totally ridiculous and completely different than anybody else. And he was also way too old at the time, and he's screaming in the basement, claiming that Dottie can't hear him, and you can hear everything you want in that house. It's unbelievable how easy it is to hear what's going on in the basement. I've been there. Matt Lauer himself was stunned by, because he had heard these dungeon stories, and it's just like this normal basement that's right underneath the kitchen. Anyway, that mom has completely flipped.
Really?
And she was a key witness for the prosecution. She was, in fact, I believe, the last witness for the prosecution, and she has signed a very impressive affidavit, basically saying she was manipulated into the whole thing. She doesn't believe her son was ever abused by Jerry Sandusky. Her testimony was mischaracterized and misconstrued.
Well, where's the ESPN? Where is the headline news? Where is the media? Like, where is
to be fair, this has not been made public yet. I'm telling you about things that have not been made public yet.
Good, so let's get this public.
But here's the problem. You have the Sandusky standard, which is different than the real world standard. And Frank thought that he was going to be able to get the actual accuser, Sebastian, to go along with the mom. The mom had agreed to help get Sebastian to flip. And Frank, who's overly optimistic about everything he does, partially because he has a massive ego, was unable to get Sebastian to flip. Now, here's where things, I think, get actually really interesting, and why I thought this had real opportunity to make a difference. It's not just that the mom has flipped and doesn't believe her son was abused by Jerry Sandusky. It's that she is part of the son's trust that was created with the $20 million that Penn State paid Sebastian Payden. Now, he didn't get $20 million. His attorneys, I'm sure, got a shitload. But here's the really most amazing part. And I haven't seen all the documentation on this. So part of this is me trusting what Frank has said. but based upon the affidavit of the mom, which I have seen, and I've seen some of the documentation of this, it appears as if that trust was set up with the help of the prosecutors in the Sandusky case, and the trust is being run by the girlfriend of one of the prosecutors, Joe McGettigan, and the law partner of Joe McGettigan. And there are emails.
Oh.
There are emails apparently. Now I haven't seen these. I've not seen this. So I have lower level of confidence given my view of Frank on this part. But there are emails apparently that the mom has where both Frank Fina and Joe McGettigan, the prosecutors in the Sandusky case, are on the email chain discussing how to manage Sebastian Payton's trust. Now, that's a massive, unbelievable, even by the standards of this case, conflict of interest, that if we could prove that, if this is exactly as Frank and the mom claim, even I have to believe you're cooking with oil at that point in an appeal. Now, again, there's the Sandusky standard, and it's Pennsylvania. But the problem here, perfect storm, you don't have Sebastian. So without Sebastian, you can't fully prove all of this. And even more importantly, Sebastian, because he got $20 million and because he hasn't been being paid that much out of the trust, he still has money coming in. Ryan and the rest of these accusers, part of why they're, I think, vulnerable to finally telling the truth is the money has run out. And so the mom can be portrayed both in the media and by a judge that doesn't want to believe this. She can be portrayed as the disgruntled mom of a rich son who has disowned her. And even though I don't think that's really the case, that's how the story could be spun without Sebastian. So, basically you're down to the 2-yard line, and because you don't have Sebastian, you can't get into the end zone. And, but if I had more faith in Frank, I would be touting this story a lot more. I think it's interesting. I think it's probably mostly true. It's unbelievable, even by the standards of this case, that the prosecutors would be so brazen about this. But by the way, just to be clear, this would not be an isolated situation. No. Ryan also told me that he was advised by the prosecution team which lawyers to go to go after Penn State, which again is a massive conflict of interest, especially when in Ryan, accuser number 10's case, the prosecution, Joe McGettigan, the same guy I just mentioned, who's involved in this trust involving Sebastian Payton, during Ryan's testimony, he made a huge deal over the fact that you don't have a lawyer, do you, Ryan? No. And you're not suing Penn State for any money, are you? No. And you're not expecting to get any money from this case, are you? No. Well, of course, after the case is over, he's helping to facilitate. Well, here's the right lawyer to pick. And this was not an isolated situation based upon, these are just two accusers, number 9 and number 10, and the prosecution's fingerprints are all over how the money was, siphoned from Penn State through these lawyers, the chosen lawyers, and then to the accuser himself. And, I've always said that by chance there's ever another trial for Jerry Sandusky, which there won't be. But, if there ever was, all you really have to do is, as a defense lawyer, assuming they even had the case, because I personally believe that if there was a new trial, most of these guys wouldn't even dare testify.
No.
I think they would say, you know what, I'm done. And the prosecution would be in big, big trouble. But if we pretend and all the same accusers testify at a second trial, all you got to do is in your last question ask, so how much money were you paid for your testimony in this case? And every single one of the trial accusers would have to say over $1 million. Most of them would have to say many millions of dollars. Yes. And I'm sorry, especially when you get to do it anonymously and the media is, keeping your identity silent. and they're blowing a hurricane wind at your back that you're helping put this horrible man behind prison, people will lie anonymously for millions of dollars. And it's not that difficult.
No.
So, before we jump on, I just want anyone that listened to this, if you found what John said to be mind blowing right there, if you found anything he said to kind of
Compelling.
perk your ears up and, make you raise some eyebrows, I saw Caveat Ties over here saying I never heard any of this stuff. And you're going to get so much detail. Like I said, I can't recommend with the benefit of hindsight more. I'm surprised you didn't win any awards yet for that. I'm really, honestly, it's as good of a, like, everyone raved over Serial with Adnan Syed and everything like that. Yours is just as good, if not better, because Jerry Sandusky actually matters, right? He matters because he was a major coach in the landscape of one of the biggest sports
But
teams.
I can
in the
assure
country.
you that we are never going to win any
Oh, no,
awards.
you won't win anything.
No.
Even if Jerry somehow gets out of prison, I've said this many times, and I'm not sure people understand how sincere I'm being. Even if a miracle happens and Jerry Sandusky does get exonerated or gets out of prison before he dies, whatever, which is not going to happen. But if it did, there's nothing good in that for me, really, because I truly believe I will be blamed for why people didn't come to this conclusion sooner. I know that sounds crazy.
No, you probably will.
but I understand the media very well. They're going to need a scapegoat for why they didn't even consider this scenario. And what they will say is, well, John Ziegler was such an asshole about it, and he's not a celebrity. And, if he had just been nicer and he had been, famous, we would have considered what he was saying.
Exactly.
Of course, that's all bullshit, but that's what they will do. I'm actually much more likely to be the GOAT, not in the greatest of all time, but in the old definition of GOAT, I'm the person to blame for why the media didn't believe in all this. And by the way, I've even had I had Bob Costas on my podcast.
I was going to ask you about that.
Which was a remarkable interview considering his role in this case. And I've told this scenario and this theory to Bob off the air, and his reaction has kind of proven it to me, because Bob, I think, respects my work, but he's definitely in the category of, well, if you could just be more measured in your presentation. And I'm like, well, Bob, I'm sure that when we were storming the beaches at Normandy, if we had just been nicer about it, the Nazis would have said, "Okay, we give up. Come on over."
John Ziegler ever gets nicer and more measured about his opinions,
something's wrong.
Fucked.
Something's
There's no hope. It's over. We're done. They got to John. If they get to John, we're screwed.
It's also the story of a guy who apparently did sick things to little kids. And if he's innocent of that, of course you're not going to be entirely measured about everything you say when you're trying to prove that he's innocent of that.
Well, Dave, I appreciate you saying that, because I've had my father say this to me, and I'm like, because my father's a big NPR fan, so he likes the NPR presentation.
You don't whisper enough,
and I'm always like, how can I allege the greatest injustice of the 21st century and keep my cadence like this? I mean, how can I do that? If it's possible, it's beyond me.
It's crazy.
I do want to get to Nate's comment.
I was going to say, let's get to some of these.
He said, definitely SMU got it for paying players. If it were true, Penn State football should have been eradicated permanently.
Yes.
And he said, I'm absolutely going to check it out. Is John familiar with Monica Perez? His intuition is very similar. I don't know that name.
I don't know who Monica Perez is, as far as I'm aware.
Nate, if you can provide us a little more detail on what, if it's something that piques John's interest, we'll have a podcast about it. It'll be incredibly deep, and he'll have his other life work to fall into that is unintentional. So
I don't know. I think I might be done with this kind of stuff, guys.
That's very fair. That's very fair.
Though? Just knowing what I know about you, just from our one interaction before and just seeing you from afar, if it really piques your interest, I think you wouldn't voluntarily go for things. Like if you start to see bullshit,
I appreciate you saying that, Alex. I appreciate you saying that. And in a younger me, that would have been absolutely the case. But this case and some other things about where we are, have gotten me down quite a bit, and I'm not sure that I still have that same reservoir. I mean, if I was given the right platform, I would have that kind of energy. But I'm really tired of beating my head against the wall, as I have on this case and others for 13, 14 years. So I appreciate what you're saying, but I'm starting to get old. I'm 58 years old now, and this has been a long 13 years. I've aged about 25 years in the last 13. So
you're not allowed. I don't accept that. You're not allowed. You're one of the best that we have in terms of fighting bullshit. So no,
thank you.
I just don't allow it. Anyway, so when it comes to bullshit, let's talk about some college sports. Another thing that's a thorn in your side, because I as I am, as you are, I grew up loving college sports, college basketball, college football. I'm a track guy, so I used to pay attention. I still do to the track championships and things like that. But college sports don't exist anymore, do they, John? They're not. We have pro light at this point. The NIL has fucked everything. And we could have seen this a mile away. You did see this a mile away. I remember so many, tweets and X posts that you were given when the NIL was coming down the pike about how this is going to fuck everything up. And lo and behold, look at where we are. So, John, give me your, very, very, watered down opinion on the NIL.
Well, I will say that I was probably more prescient on NIL than I have been on anything else in my entire career, because I really was way out ahead of this. And the reason I think I got it was that I think I have a little bit of a unique understanding of the political divide that was causing people to be duped by the NIL issue. And here's what I mean by this, because even though I'm a hardcore conservative, I live in Southern California. I have a lot of liberal friends, not just here, but throughout the country. I've been very close for many years to a very liberal Democratic congressman from Louisville, Kentucky, John Yarmouth, who actually held a hearing on NIL early on. And he and I had a very eye-opening conversation after that hearing, because I remember saying, John, what the fuck was that? Because
you guys did a radio show back in the day, right? A sports
we
show
did a
together.
TV, we did a TV show back in Louisville many, many years ago. And anyway, what I realized was that liberals were being duped by NIL because they thought it was a civil rights issue. That, oh my gosh, these poor black kids, they're being taken advantage of. We've got to allow them to get paid. And that was very appealing to liberals. And of course, that's a bullshit narrative on so many different levels.
Yes.
And then conservatives, and I fought conservatives as hard as I could. I even went on some talk shows to discuss this, where I saw that conservative thinkers were being duped by this idea that NIL is capitalism at work. This is letting the free market work. And I'm like, guys, I'm as much of a free market guy as anybody. This ain't a free market. This is a contrived market, because if you understand anything about college sports, it's that the people have a passion for their school or for their team that is going to cause them to not make rational economic decisions. And it's going to end up being pay for play, because there's no way to restrict it. It's like almost literally like free speech. So name,
quickly,
image,
John,
and likeness can be anything you want it to be.
What?
I'm sorry.
What is your response, real quick, to those that say, well, the boosters were doing it in the shadows, now it's just out up front?
Yeah, first of all, I think that was somewhat exaggerated.
Yes.
I agree that it was happening at times, but there was at least some tension that you might get caught. And by the way, teams did get caught from time to time and paid a very severe punishment.
Yeah.
And by the way, Alex, here's my ultimate retort to that. I think it was actually good for college sports. And here's why. Remember what I consider the glory days of college football in the 80s and the 90s. When you look at the most memorable matchups during that time period, you're talking about Penn State, Miami in the Fiesta Bowl, highest rated game in college football history.
Yep.
You're talking about Notre Dame versus Miami, Catholics versus criminals. You're talking about Notre Dame versus Florida State, which was a similar dynamic. Yep. What made those matchups so interesting? You had the perception of the rule followers going up against the rule breakers.
Yes.
And so
you had a face versus heel.
That is a huge part of why Penn State Miami was the highest rated college football game, still is, in the history of television.
Yep.
And so I'm not suggesting that this was by design, but it was a feature. It wasn't really a bug, as long as the NCAA had some legitimate enforcement mechanism, which they did. And so I understand, that argument, but it was a fallacy, and it led to a situation where it was the Wild West, especially when you add in, which is single-handedly the dumbest combination of rule changes in the history of humanity, to introduce unlimited NIL and unlimited transfers.
Yes.
At the same time. I mean,
it's wild. It's so stupid.
Unbelievable.
Now teams can pay. If you opt in, what do they get? A $21 million, $25 million pool, where now actually schools can pay their athletes directly as well now.
$20 million annually.
Under the theory, which I'm going to bet I'm right about this one again. The theory here is that they're effectively restricting NIL to what it was originally intended to be. See, the number one fallacy in the whole NIL debate is the idea that the average college athlete is worth anything in a legitimate NIL market. They are worth nothing.
Nope.
And let me prove it to you. Okay. When Ohio State plays Michigan in football, it's obviously a massive event, almost no matter how good the teams are in any particular year.
Yep.
If you take the exact same athletes and you put them in a different stadium with different uniforms representing, some local car dealership, and a month later, and you play the game again, do you know how much money that's going to generate?
$50.
Nothing, because it is the brand of the schools that is generating the revenue. It is, with some exceptions, in our lifetimes, I will certainly grant that Tim Tebow, that Johnny Manziel, that Reggie Bush in the college football realm, they got ripped off. They would have made bank on legitimate NIL endorsements, but they are incredibly rare. And so
and maybe you have like Carmelo Anthony in basketball because of his hype, he would have done. But the thing that drives me crazy about the NIL is the way it's looked at, an athlete can go find themselves a sponsorship. They maybe have an agent that works with them, and they can get paid from that sponsor. I actually don't have any issue with the athlete doing it. What drives me fucking crazy is when I hear Tennessee is getting this transfer and guaranteeing them an NIL. That's just a contract. The school should never be doing the NIL.
To me,
the player.
To me, Alex, I'm a realist, and I think this was always a Pandora's box.
100%.
Could not possibly be closed. I liken it again to speech. You can't restrict speech, otherwise you have no free speech. Well, and it's incredibly similar. That's why I'm convinced that this current situation where they think they've limited NIL, I don't think they really have. No. Because who is going to be the enforcement mechanism that says, you know what, this is an illegitimate NIL deal? Nobody is going to do that.
No,
especially if it's a poor black kid who's getting the money. Nobody is going to step in and say this is an illegitimate NIL deal. So what's going to happen is that your stars are going to get paid up and above the salary cap number through NIL, which, by the way, only your Alabamas, your USCs, your Notre Dames, your Miamis, those types of schools, Georgia, those are the only schools that are going to be able to do that, which is going to destroy
it's the Big Ten versus the SEC in football already. It's already done. It's Big Ten versus SEC. Everyone else is just kind of trying. Like, it's already apparent what's going on.
But Alex, and you're okay. You're getting a little bit ahead of me, but I'll go to the end of this. To me, it's not. To me, it's not just the competitive imbalance that is going to be problematic. I believe the competitive imbalance is going to be so dramatic that you're going to see significant programs quit. Probably. That you're going to, and by the way, the big boys may want that. I don't think in the end they're going to like it, but they may think that they want this 40 or 50 team mega conference. And by the way, you know what? The only hope I see here is maybe we do go to a mega conference. They get 50 schools and they go, maybe we should split these up by geography. And we go back. we go back.
It just separates back to where it was.
we go back to the way things used to be. 5, 10 team conferences separated by geography. I mean, I think that's a scenario.
Maybe that'll be the best case scenario, that they get so bad that it becomes good again.
No, that is my only hope in this. But you're going to lose, in my opinion. You're going to lose a lot of mid-level schools that are just going to say, fuck it, we can't possibly compete. By the way, we were not making $20 million from our football program anyway, so why the hell are we going to spend this money on football? We have no hope of being competitive, so we're just going to quit.
You know what's going to be the ultimate pickle that they're going to find themselves in? When your scenario happens and the first ones to go are the HBCUs. And they're going to sit there and be like, oh, that's not what we meant to happen. Let's just go.
You know, I hadn't thought about that possibility.
They're going to funnel $50 million into each of their programs to make sure they still exist.
Yeah, that's an interesting point. Because
they're going to be the first ones that go, because
you're going to have
money.
I think that they haven't even begun to contemplate all the ramifications of all this. I'm also very much against the expanded playoff, which I think is actually, I think it's related to this. I think the expanded playoff, here's what baffles me. Maybe you guys can explain this to me. Last year's playoff, okay, in my opinion, could not have possibly gone worse. I mean, because we had 11 games, only 2 of them were good games. You had 9 loser games. You had a national championship between 2 mega programs, Ohio State, Notre Dame, where the ratings sucked. Okay. Ohio State, Notre Dame, national championship, the ratings sucked.
Yeah.
Ohio State won the national championship, which retroactively caused the game of the regular season, the only game that people remember from the regular season, which was Michigan upsetting Ohio State at Ohio State. It erased it. It erased the only game that mattered. It erased it completely. It obliterated it from reality. How could it have gone any worse? And yet I see so many college football influencers going, that was fucking awesome. And I'm like, what are you watching? What if this was awesome? I mean, I can't even imagine what terrible would have been. Because I admit I had a bias against it from the beginning. I didn't want it to succeed. I thought it could not have systematically failed any worse other than maybe if the national championship game had been a complete and total blowout, which, by the way, it looked like it was going to be for the first couple of quarters before Notre Dame did a cosmetic job on the score. So I am do you guys have any explanation for how people, is it because people wanted the playoff to succeed so badly?
That's definitely part of it.
They wanted it to succeed. And I dislike the fact that the regular season stops mattering towards the end. Like, I liked when the regular season
towards the end. It doesn't matter ever.
In general, I liked when it used to matter.
Alex, if we go to 16 teams, if we go to a 16 team playoff, which is where they're headed, if they go to a 16 team playoff, the regular season in football is completely obliterated, because you will have the Alabamas of the world be able to lose 4 games and still have a chance to get in. 4 games. That means you don't have to start winning till you lose at least 2 or 3 games.
It's bad.
It's not going to be. The other part of this is, when do most teams play their rivalry game? The last game of the regular season. Well, the last game of the regular season has now just been made vulnerable to being a nuisance for the best teams, because they're not going to want to get people injured. By the way, these conference championship games, that's another thing that happened last year. Every single conference champion lost their playoff game. So that obliterated the meaning of the conference championship games. I can't believe I forgot to mention that. And now you're going to incentivize teams to essentially take a dive in these conference championship games and or their rivalry games, because there's nothing in it for them. And by the way, and I'm sure I would guess that these NIL contracts or these contracts with the schools are going to be by game. I certainly hope they're going to be by game and not season, because if they're by season, if you're getting paid by season, if you're getting paid by season as a football player, you know what? Why the fuck would I want to go through a 4-game playoff? Yeah. I might have to play 4 playoff games during the holidays. And not that I care about exams, but it is exam season.
Some of them.
You know what? It might be better off if we just lose this game. Who the fuck cares? Yeah. I mean, to me, this is a disaster in every possible way. I often say, and I mean this sincerely, that if an evil genius, if 6 years ago, just before the COVID panic, 5 or 6 years ago, if an evil genius with unlimited resources had been tasked with the goal of systematically destroying college sports, they could not possibly have achieved nearly as much as what happened naturally over the last 5 years. I mean, if you had taken an evil genius with unlimited resources and said, go destroy college sports, they could never have been this successful.
So if you were to design a playoff, because the playoff's here to stay, we're never going back to a BCS or that type of system. If you were to design a playoff that would work, what would a playoff look like to you?
Well, it's hard for me to do that because I despise the playoff at all levels. I think that the old BCS system was actually the closest to the perfect system. The perfect system would have been what I called and other people called the +1 system. We were so close. You play the bowl games with the traditional tie-ins, and then you pick 2 teams after the bowls to play 2 weeks later. That would have taken care of like 99% of all the problems. That would have maintained all the traditions. I think it would have made a boatload of money for everybody. Now, based upon what we currently have, I'm a realist. And so to me, I think the conference championships should really matter. I think they should be, not only should it get you in, but you should have an advantage. And I think if you don't win a conference championship, you should have to have had an absolutely amazing season to get in. So that probably means the highest number where that can work is 8. If I can see an 8-team playoff where the conference champions play at home in that first round, and where the other 4, you had to decide how many conference champions matter, but to me, it would be 4. So you have 4 conference champions that matter, and then you have the other 4 chosen by the committee, and you play 7 games, the quarterfinals. I don't hate, although I don't like it, I don't hate the idea of the quarterfinals being, that New Year's Day time period. I despise what they've done to the Rose Bowl. They've diminished the Rose Bowl now to a freaking quarterfinal game.
Yeah, the Bulls don't have the same gravitas.
They have no meaning anymore.
But if in theory, let's pretend you had an 8-team playoff, you could get close to my ultimate scenario, the +1, where if you had the 4 conference champions, you play them all on New Year's Day, staggered starting times. You have those 4 games. At the end of that, now you have 4 teams. You play the semifinals 10 days later. You play a national championship game 10 days after that. It gives you the break in between the conference championships and New Year's Day. It maintains New Year's Day as having some semblance of significance. But most importantly, it would be very difficult to imagine a scenario where Ohio State, Michigan didn't matter. Like, in other words, to me, the worst part of a 16-team playoff is you are begging. I mean, especially if you have the Big Ten guaranteed 4 spots in the playoffs or whatever it is, you are begging for a scenario where Ohio State, Michigan, where one of those teams goes, why are we playing this game?
Would you include any of the mid majors in your 8-team scenario? Would they have to be like an outstanding season for?
Well, if somebody went undefeated and they got into the top 4 of the non-conference champions, sure, knock yourself out. But I don't think that's very likely given. See, I think we already saw it during the NCAA basketball tournament this year. Cinderella is dead.
Yeah.
Cinderella has been killed by NIL and instant transfer. And I don't think it's coming back.
See, I feel like we should do like a relegation system in college football at this point where there's the 4 conferences that matter. They're the only ones that can be championship eligible. And this is where you could just go back to 4 teams, 4-team playoff, like it's your +1 scenario. There's 4 conferences that matter. These are the only 4 conferences that a champion can come from. The champions of each then play a playoff. All the other conferences, there's a relegation. The bottom group for those big 4 go to a certain other conference. The top of they have a sister conference, and the top do like a soccer relegation system. So it makes them.
Well, there's some problems with that. First of all, scheduling. As you know, in college football scheduling, you schedule 3-4 years in advance.
That could be difficult,
and that would be a really big problem. The other problem is, I think you get to what we talked about earlier. A team that gets relegated just quits. Say, fuck it. If we can't compete, fuck it. I mean, and I really do think that if I'm right about that, I think the big schools are going to end up regretting that situation. By the way, I mean, there hasn't been that many great upsets in college football recently, but what we remember the great upsets, right? I mean, people are still talking about Appalachian State and Michigan back in 2007 or whatever the hell it was. I mean, the fact that that's no longer going to even be theoretically possible, I think you lose something. I mean, I mean it when I say I can't think of anything great about college athletics in general or college football in particular that hasn't been greatly endangered, if not destroyed, by the last few years. I mean, every single aspect that made it great, even walk-ons are now endangered.
I'm a track guy. They just did the roster limits for track, and it has hurt every single program. Programs are folding. They're going distance only, and kids that used to be walk-ons that would make a team and then maybe become a diamond in the rough, run at a United States champion, maybe get to the Worlds. They can't do it anymore because the limits make the standards so high. Every which way, NCAA is getting fucked over in every single sport.
The non-revenue sports are all
screwed.
in very big trouble.
Yes.
And I do believe that the U.S. Olympic teams of the future will not be as strong because of the lack of support that those sports are going to get at the college level. I don't know how much it's going to impact us because, when you're talking about Olympic athletes, you're talking about really the creme de la creme de la creme. And so they will always have a place to go. But occasionally you're going to have somebody that is a late bloomer and the late bloomer is not going to have a place. You're never going to find that person in the scenario that it looks like we're headed towards. And more importantly than that, there's a lot that used to make college sports great. It made it interesting. It made it romantic. And all of that has been tossed out the window. It's just a business now. And as I often say, people treat college sports, especially football, like a religion. And you cannot treat a religion solely as a business and expect that people will continue to treat it like a religion. Eventually, they're going to stop treating it like a religion, and you're going to have killed the golden goose. And I believe that goose has had his head chopped off, its nuts chopped off. I mean, I think that look, I don't know when it's going to happen, and I could be, maybe I'm overly pessimistic or optimistic, depending on your perspective. Maybe people are so stupid that they won't figure this out, or maybe they just won't want to believe it. Right?
I think it's the second one. They won't want to believe it.
Maybe they're just going to look at those uniforms. It's interesting, guys. Have you noticed this? And I don't know if this is by design or not. one of the very few good things that I have noticed about college football, not basketball, but football over the last few years is we've gotten further away from traditions, and the traditions are all been shit on. It does seem to me as if schools are clinging more to their traditional uniforms. We're not seeing as many of these crazy
not Oregon, not everyone's Oregon anymore.
Color schemes. And I wonder if that's by design, that somebody out there realizes, if we just keep them in the same uniforms that these guys remember from 20, 30 years ago, they're going to think that nothing really has changed. And there might be something to that.
There might be something to it, but I don't know. For me, most modern designs for sports teams nowadays, I just don't like. It's like, I feel like that's also, I like more traditional.
I'm there too.
The minimalist shit is terrible.
But like, for instance, it seemed like every team had a black uniform that they were going to for several years, and it seems to me as if that has stopped. Now, maybe I haven't noticed it as much, but the all black is was terrible to me, especially when it's not your color scheme. I mean, and so I'm as the Seinfeld, there was a famous Seinfeld episode where Jerry talks about, well, you're just rooting for laundry. That's essentially what we're down to here is we're rooting for laundry. And at least in college football, the laundry still mostly looks like the laundry that you grew up with. College basketball has completely lost the plot on that. I can't even recognize what teams are playing based upon the uniforms.
I have no idea.
And the same thing in the NBA. I have no.
The NBA has lost its way completely on what they're doing with uniforms. I don't even like it. It astounds me how they're all over the place on what they're doing. Anytime they come out with a new uniform design, like, oh, this is the city design, it just looks terrible. And it's like, why are we doing this?
I am completely baffled that the NBA is garnering as much money in their television contract as they did from NBC. I'm completely baffled by the salaries that NBA players get. I mean, to me, the product is just unwatchable. I don't care who wins. The players are way too spoiled. I can't relate to it at all. So I am.
Well, I want to really quickly get to some comments, and then I want to jump to pros because I'm right with you on this, John. Nate G coming in saying super predatory agents too. That's a part of the NIL. Nate wanting to know, how could you not enjoy what Cam Scativo did? And I think there's some individual performances you can enjoy and get behind, but the overall product hasn't been good. Like, you can have those moments that still are fun, right? But it's not like where we would get when the BCS was around, all the bowls mattered. Like, okay, you didn't get in the championship, but you were in the Rose Bowl. That wasn't the championship bowl that year. That mattered. You were in the Citrus Bowl. You were in the Sugar Bowl. They all had meaning. There's no meaning anymore. They're just sponsors for a freaking playoff spot. So it's tedious.
I'm amazed that they still exist, and
they're not really bowls.
And I do believe, as someone who goes to the Rose Parade about every other year, and has been a couple of different Rose Bowls, to me that was always one of the great college football traditions. I don't know how the Rose Bowl game survives long term as a quarterfinal game. I don't know how that happens, but I have to say, it's doing so far. I mean, last year, now granted, it was Ohio State, Oregon, which was kind of a traditional, Big Ten, Pac-12 matchup with two massive fan bases, but it did, it was a sold out game, and it got, I think the ratings were actually as good as the national championship game for that Rose Bowl, pretty darn close. So far the Rose Bowl is hanging in there, but long term, see, I'm a big believer that we are about to experience a massive generational shift. Like, there's still a lot of guys, a little older than me in their 60s and 70s who have the same kind of value system with regard to sports that you and I have, but they're all going to be dead or in nursing homes soon.
Yeah.
And I think that in that next 10-year period, you're going to see a major drop off of the value that things like the Rose Bowl have. That has a shelf
100%.
life. I don't know how long
100%.
the shelf life is, but there's a shelf life there. And I think that it's probably not much more than 10 or 15 years, because then everyone's dead.
The
Yeah.
fact
has
that
any-
there's no superstars biting the roses when they know they get there, like one of my biggest memories
That's
is
a great
watching
point, right?
is watching Charles Woodson with the rose in his mouth celebrating because the
Yeah.
Wolverines were going to the Rose Bowl. You
No,
don't get that anymore. They were huge
So
moments.
what you
That's
said
a-
on viewership, real quick. Rose Bowl at 21.1 million, national championship at 22.1 million.
Yeah, right there.
So it was right next to it.
So I was pretty darn close, wasn't I?
Close.
Pretty darn close. Yeah,
So
and
go ahead.
well, no, you make a great point about. I'm amazed that the players today have any value on the Rose Bowl at all. The only thing they remember from the Rose Bowl is maybe Vince Young against USC, maybe, and that was probably in highlights as a very young kid. And by the way, I was at that game. And
what a moment with Vince Young skirting and friggin' in between the pylon. Like he was so good in college.
you want to hear a funny story about that that no one else will ever tell? So I wish I could ask Reggie Bush one question. No one remembers this, but after Vince Young scored that touchdown, there was obviously a lot of chaos on the field.
Yep.
And Texas went for I can't remember if they were lining up for a 2-point conversion or whatever. For some reason, Pete Carroll called a timeout. And there was only like 20 seconds left in the game. And no one thought that was a big deal. So why did he call a timeout for the extra point? Well, that ended up becoming a huge deal in my mind, because you may recall that when USC got the ball back, they needed a touchdown. There was a little swing pass to Reggie Bush. Now, of course, Reggie Bush that year was electric, right? Get him in the open field, watch the fuck out, right?
Exactly.
So where I happened to be sitting, I did not have great seats, but I had a perfect view of what Reggie Bush saw when he got that swing pass. And I'm telling you, I held my breath for like a half a second, because I'm like, holy shit, he's got an opening. Like, holy shit, if he takes this up the field, this is going to be Reggie against two guys in the backfield. Catch me if you can. Look the fuck out.
And that year, Reggie scoring a touchdown in that situation. There's no one catching him.
And even if he doesn't score, that's the way the season deserves to end, right?
Exactly.
Reggie Bush, open field, catch me if you can.
Yeah.
But Pete Carroll had called USC's last time out.
Yep.
And Reggie Bush scampered out of bounds, because instinctually he knew that if he got tackled, the game was over. But if
he made the right football play,
if they still had that timeout, God, I would love to ask Reggie whether he thought the same thing I did, because I'm telling you, I had a perfect view of it. And if I was one of those Texas defensive backs, I would have been shitting my pants.
And they were wearing white that day, so you would have thought. I would love to ask Pete Carroll that too, if he ever regrets calling that timeout.
I doubt he's ever thought about it. He's still trying to explain the not giving the ball to Lynch in the Super Bowl.
Yeah.
Which by the way, I think was actually the right call. It was just the wrong pass play, but that's another story.
A few more comments. Nate G saying Bowling Green almost upset Penn State last year. Almost, but we never remember almost. There's been a lot of almost. We don't. That's the tough part. You only remember the big ones. Nate G saying tradition isn't quite that. He corrected that down there. Yet on X, Kansas State and Colorado can't keep Nebraska out of their mentions on X. Okay. That's at least the fan base is still there. He's saying OKC didn't celebrate their championship and the Florida Panthers are still partying. So yeah, there you go. So let's get to the pro side. I don't want to hold you for too much longer, John, but we're having a good time. So we started talking about the NBA. I'm right with you. This is an unwatchable product. And this goes down to college basketball too, because they're emulating the NBA. And the one thing about college basketball that I used to enjoy was that even as the NBA was starting to get more three happy, you still had your big men with the back to the basket. You still had your slashers that would take the ball in. And now it is all just run, 2 passes, 3, clank. Run, 2 passes, 3, clank. And the NBA is even worse. I watched a little bit of the finals because I was just bored. And I'm watching it, and I'm just like, Shai Gilgeous-Alexander is, 6'9", 6'10"? And he's just out in the end taking threes, barely slashing. And it's an unwatchable product. And the only person that can play the way they want to play now is Steph Curry. I don't know. I can't watch it. I hate it. I'm with you, John.
Well, I agree with you. I mean, it's certainly a different totally different brand of basketball than what I grew up with. I was a huge basketball fan as a kid.
Apparently 6'6".
I went to
No
a
way, Shy's 6'6". That's fucking
Sorry.
lie. Shy's at least 6'9". He's massive.
Sorry,
I mean,
go ahead, John.
when I was a kid, I actually wanted to be a high school social studies teacher and a varsity basketball coach. That was one of my career goals. I mean, I loved basketball that much, but I don't even think that there's ever even a set play in the NBA anymore. I don't think
Very
that
rare.
Pick and
exists.
roll. It's all pick and rolls the most.
I don't think. I'll tell you the part that, and this makes me sound like a total boomer, dinosaur, but I don't even understand what the traveling rule is anymore. I really don't. I have no. It's worse. To me, it's way worse than if they had changed it. Right? If they had changed it and allowed 3 steps, I would have hated that. But at least I would know what the rule is.
Yeah.
I honestly do not know what the rule is, and whenever. Occasionally, I'll hear an analyst say, "Well, that might have been a travel." I laugh. I'm like, well, what do you mean that might have been a travel?
And the thing with the analysts, there are a lot of old heads like us that watched it, and they know it's a travel. So that's when they say it, you know it is. And the thing is, AI killed dribbling because he carried all the time, and they rarely called him on the carry, and he carried. And now everybody carries. It drives me crazy as guys are walking up and they're palming the ball up and down, just walking up, and it's like,
you know what you're doing, Alex? I'm sure you're not thinking about this.
Being old.
You're making a great argument for the entire concept of the slippery slope, which I'm a big believer in.
I'm agreeing with that. Yeah, 100%.
If you allow the hand over, that's why there used to be a line.
Yes.
Because people understood that if you allow this, then eventually you're going to get to a much more significant situation where you can't call carrying, you can't call traveling. That's the slippery slope, and that's what has happened without ever actually having a rule change about what traveling is. And to me, the reason why that matters is not just that that you shouldn't be allowed to take 3 steps. I see a lot, not that I watch basketball nearly as much as I used to, but I see a lot of situations where guys are trapped by good defense and get out of it by just walking.
Well, they all take a step before they dribble. They all take a step before they dribble now, which is the definition of travel. When you first learn, you need to get the ball out of your hands on the ground while taking a step at a minimum. They all take that first step or that back step. And that's another pandemic. Guys don't know where they are on the floor anymore.
Explain to me how is it that the NBA is even as popular as it is? I don't get it on any level. The salaries are too high. Not only are the rules incomprehensible and the product is crap, but you also have a situation where the players don't even seem to care. I mean, I really don't. And the other part about it is, because you have so many one and dones from college, you don't even have the built-in fan base of a guy that you knew who he was in college. I don't even know the names of most of these players. I mean, so how? And I realize I'm no longer, as a 58-year-old white guy, I'm no longer really the target audience of the NBA. I used to be the target audience of the NBA. I no longer am. But why is it that this sport is appealing to anybody? I really don't get it. I'm baffled.
I think it's they rely on just a few stars that they build up.
That and
that's it. They just promote
the clips that do go around on Twitter and TikTok and Instagram, they do garner people to actually want to come see, because they're seeing only the best parts of the game.
It's very popular on X. I'll tell you that.
So when you're seeing only the best parts of the game, people are going to come there. I want to go see that guy play. Whoever it was in the clip that made the play. And it is funny.
What happens when LeBron and Steph are gone? What happens
They're
now?
hoping that Shy and Jason Tatum, and they built them up enough.
Well,
that they
no,
can
actually,
keep it going.
Shy may be part of it. Jason may be part of it. Really, it's like Luka and Anthony Edwards.
And
Those are who they're
Jokic
kind of.
too,
I don't find Luka interesting at all.
I love Luka as a basketball player, but it's a personality he's meh.
To me,
I like Jokic because Jokic hates basketball. I think my favorite part about him is he fucking hates what he does, and he's just better than everyone.
He's just really good at
one of
it.
my favorite things is when he's interviewed, and they're like, "What are you gonna do about the parade?" And he's like, "What do you mean a parade?" And they're like, "There's a parade in a few days." Like, I want to go home. What are we doing? Like,
are you aware that there's a TikTok character that just does him hating basketball. That's
No,
the
that's
entire
amazing.
TikTok
I love
account.
that.
It's hilarious.
Incredible.
You will love it. You got to check it out.
I
Find
gotta
it.
check that out.
It is really funny though when you bring up that they don't run set plays anymore. Because the last team I remember running set plays a lot was the Golden State Warriors when it was Steph and Clay when they were younger, and they were running around all over the place getting open because they were the Splash Brothers. They weren't like an ISO team. No, Mark Jackson had them running plays to get those two.
But
open.
that's why they got rid of Mark Jackson, because he ran plays,
yeah,
and
but
Steve Kerr
but,
just
but
lets them do
still,
whatever the fuck they want.
but still, that was the team that ran all. That was
Yeah,
part of the issue of guarding them. They were all over the place. They're so slippery, and then they're open, and all of a sudden they're splashing. Like
And
that's it.
And how about the end of the big man in the pivot? I mean, that's completely gone. I mean, it's not even part of the game anymore. I mean, when you consider that the league was really made on the backs of Bill Russell and Wilt Chamberlain and Kareem Abdul-Jabbar and
then
people
Olajuwon carried that, and Shaq carried that, and
Right.
Ewing,
I mean,
they were carrying the
Patrick
tradition.
Ewing and
Yeah.
Hakeem Olajuwon. I mean, none of those. I'm not even sure that they could really play in the league today. I mean, I don't know what value, I'm not sure what value they would really create. I'm astonished that it's as popular as it is.
So-
I think that there's a lot of bubbles in sports economically, but I think the NBA is the biggest bubble. The idea that the Los Angeles Lakers that don't even own their arena were sold for a valuation. By the way, they weren't sold for $10 billion, but they were sold for a valuation of $10 billion is absolutely insane to me.
It's
I
wild.
mean, I do not understand where that valuation comes from. I don't get it. Not either from the economics of it or from where the future appears to be headed. Because I think that basketball is in big trouble. Now, maybe it's just because I'm not interested in it, but I just think that from every possible angle, it has big problems. But I think most sports have big problems. I think baseball is a bubble too. I'm amazed at the salaries in baseball.
So, Dave, I want you to ponder this though: is the popularity of 2K still bringing fans there? Because a lot of the younger generation plays a lot of NBA 2K. So,
but
are
2K,
product that
you know what? Maybe that might be what I'm not calculating into.
But 2K, along with almost every other sports game, has also gone downhill in quality. And while it's done that, it has basically involved a lot of people like going on and playing it still. I'm not saying they don't, but it also basically is involved the gambling aspect and all these types of things where you're paying money for card packs or you're paying money for aesthetics on your player that you're playing as. And people have gone and now they're complaining more and more and more.
Do the players being so butthurt about their stats hurt the game as well? Because there's so many players that complain about their stats. What are you doing, Ronnie 2K? And it's like, shut the fuck up. It's a video game.
I don't know if that matters too much. But when it comes to people having to pay more and more money for certain things, which they wish they could just unlock by playing, or when it comes to just the gameplay not being as good as look, I've been playing 2K13 because that game's just fun. Like that game is just fun. But when it comes to the newer ones, they're just not. Exactly. They're just not as fun to play for a longer period of time. So many people are actually jumping off the games as well.
Well, you guys mentioned the gambling issue. To me, this is the most underreported, under-talked about issue in the history of sports, where every single major sports league or sport has effectively not just accepted gambling, they've embraced it because 100%. Of their broken business model. And this is going to it's already having, but will have an unbelievably destructive impact, not just on the sports themselves, and not just, by the way, we've got an investigation in the NBA right now
with Malik Beasley, right?
Over betting. But to me, that's just the tip of the iceberg. The destruction that this is going to cause among average citizens. I mean, to me, when ESPN promotes their gambling, they might as well be promoting heroin. I mean, in all seriousness, this game brought to you by heroin, because I mean, that's essentially what they're doing. They are feeding people a drug that is in many cases going to end in their personal destruction.
Yeah.
Whether it's a divorce, unemployment, all sorts of terrible things that happen, maybe even suicide,
and maybe mob still getting involved. There's still mafia type of shit that goes on with that too. They're still very involved.
I mean, but look, it is domestic violence increases because of gambling. I mean, it is a horrendous It is a horrendous influence on society. And the leagues have gotten no blowback for embracing this at all. And why? Well, because ESPN is on the take, and ESPN's not going to report on any of the negative aspects of gambling because
Absolutely not.
that's how they fix their broken business model.
Mhm.
ESPN had the greatest business model in the world back in the cable bundling days. Once that exploded, they needed a new revenue source, so they decided gambling. Fuck people. We don't give a shit about that. Fuck the sacredness of sports. We need more revenue. And the fact that this has happened as systematically as it has, without the public really even thinking about it, I mean, is unbelievable to me.
I remember when ESPN and the likes and the government was fighting to get FanDuel and DraftKings out of places. They were trying to get them gone because they weren't a traditional sports book.
Because
they weren't allowed. And then all of a sudden you wake up one day and there's a commercial on your NFL game about FanDuel. And it's like, the fuck? Like, when did
Pete Rozelle would not even allow Jimmy the Greek on the NFL Today to actually mention point spreads because he understood how incredibly dangerous that was to the sport.
And now it's everywhere.
And now they've completely embraced it. And it's a disaster waiting to happen. It is a disaster. Now, the only thing keeping it from being a total disaster from a sports perspective is that the players are all getting paid so much money these days that you would think that they don't need to be engaged in some sort of point shaving. But, in the Beasley case, he wasn't making all that much money, and he was apparently in financial disarray and owed a whole bunch of money to a lot of people. So it only takes one guy, maybe two, to do this, especially in basketball where you only have 5 on the court at any given time.
Yeah, so it's really I was gonna say, it's funny. One of our friends has said this about basketball a long time ago, back when Timothy Mozgov got paid way too much. But he said, too much money, too little talent in the NBA, right? where they're just overpaying people to the point of nonsensical proportions.
Yep. Shout out Matt Santos for that quote there. He's 100% right. So a few whatchamacallit comments here, Nate G. Most of my friends don't really pay attention to the NBA except to bet, but that's all about to be killed by the big, beautiful bill. Nate G saying, I love sports betting. I do very well during hockey and football season. And lastly, he says, been trying to rally my fellow bettors to ride to Boston and to throw our betting tickets into the Boston Harbor in protest of the addition to the BBB. That would be, honestly, if there's a Boston betting party, that would be absolutely hilarious. But, I mean, you have a point there. And, we've been known that betting has been addictive and dangerous, and it's why they've tried to keep it confined with the
At least
casinos.
they include the hotline when they talk about it. If you have a gambling addiction, go ahead and call.
But that's why they've really tried to confine the casinos, the major sect, to like Vegas and to Atlantic City. You have your ones that spur up, but not these big major ones. They've known the dangers of them. So there is 100% that. And so the last thing I want to talk to you about, and I know how much you enjoy this, John. When are we going to see the NFFL, the National Flag Football League? When is that going to be official? We're allowing our NFL players to go play in the Olympic flag football.
Actually, I'll bring it up here.
They are penalizing. They're using highlight hits that they penalize. Like what the hell's going on with our NFL, John?
Well, I have been very pessimistic about where we're headed with regard to football, tackle football, and the NFL for quite a while. I mean, it's so obvious what has happened. I mean, Aaron Rodgers talks about it. Tom Brady talks about it. Joe Flacco has made recent comments about it. I mean, and these are guys who you would think would be thrilled with the softening of the NFL because they're quarterbacks, right? It's interesting to me that it's often the quarterbacks that are most outspoken about what bullshit this is when they're the ones that are supposedly being protected.
I feel like they also know that their voice means more than like a linebacker saying it. And I think just
maybe
they know that them saying it as quarterbacks who are the ones being protected, them saying it has a little more weight than like Troy Polamalu.
I think that the NFL changing the Pro Bowl to flag football and not just allowing NFL players to play in the Olympics, but basically the whole reason why flag football is even in the Olympics is because the NFL promoted it, and because
Mm-hmm.
the Olympic Games are in Los Angeles in 2028. So this is clearly an effort by the National Football League to desensitize us to the whole issue of flag football. Now there is a rational explanation for this that's not nefarious. Especially with women, it's a way to bring people into the game that they would never be able to participate in otherwise. And I'm sure that that's the argument that the NFL would be using. Hey, this is making the game more accessible to people.
So can I jump in? Because I
Right here.
fucking hate all of the high school women's flag football programs. I hate them all. Put pads on them and let them play. If there's enough women that want to play, let them fucking play. To me, this is another way where it's a bunch of people telling women, you can't handle physicality. It's why they changed lacrosse.
I'm not defending it. I'm just telling you what the NFL would say.
Stupid. And it's funny because it's right here. Even though it's AI, it's saying strong emphasis on accessibility and inclusivity. So it's right there.
Right. And look, and by the way, let me be clear. If the NFL had not so clearly become unbelievably soft in comparison to what it was in the 70s and the 80s and the 90s, I would be all in favor of a flag football option for kids that, are just not made to play tackle football.
Because it wouldn't be a threat.
Because right. But to me, it is a clear threat because we are so obviously moving in that direction, even at the NFL level. Now, I have made various predictions about what's going to happen. I don't know what it's going to look like, but it will not shock me if in the next 5 to 10 years, the rules regarding specifically the quarterback are so unbelievably benign that effectively it's flag football.
Whether he'll be in a different colored shirt, they will have him in a different.
Give him a nice penny. Yeah,
Like they'll just have when the team is wearing their home jerseys, they'll just have him in like an alternate quarterback jersey. And
you know what? I think that's quite possible. I think something like that is plausible. I think effectively they will not be allowed to touch the quarterback, or at least not tackle the quarterback. But it's not just the quarterback. Now, we survived what I thought was a big scare last year, something that did not get nearly enough attention. It was about a year ago when they supposedly outlawed the hip drop tackle.
Oh my goodness.
Which was so unbelievably stupid. And then when the season came around, they decided effectively to not call it during games and to only, fine people during the week, which is hilarious, right? By the way, not the worst solution, but you're going to punish players for this hip drop tackle via fines, which they don't really give a shit about because they're making so much money and the fines aren't that big. But to my knowledge, there were no actual penalties for the hip drop tackle.
I don't remember.
I thought there was like two, but I can't remember. Hold on.
I don't remember one.
No,
and I was looking at it pretty carefully. But if the hip drop tackle had been enforced as a rule, as written, we would already effectively be in flag football. Because, and it's happened so much in life where especially liberals don't understand the precedent that they're setting and the slippery slope and the Pandora's box, to use all these cliches. But here's my biggest problem with the hip drop tackle. Because I get that it does potentially create injuries for a runner under certain circumstances. By the way, you can't play tackle football if you're going to eliminate all injuries. It's not possible.
There are certain tackles you can't control when your hip falls down when you're in the middle of a tackle.
I understand that, but here's the biggest problem with the whole hip drop tackle thing. And maybe somebody at the NFL office realized this. I'm giving them way too much credit. But here's the problem. Not only is it almost impossible to discern what the fuck a hip drop tackle is, but here's the biggest problem. It will be incredibly easy for running backs to learn how to fall down in a way that makes it look like it was a hip drop tackle.
Very true.
And so what I envisioned when I first heard about this rule, in fact, on my podcast, I even did a mock play-by-play third down and 16, swing pass to Barkley. Barkley is tackled for a 1-yard gain. Oh, but it was a hip drop tackle. He fell down perfectly. Yep. That's a penalty and a first down, Philadelphia Eagles. I mean, that is not a far-fetched scenario.
No, your savvy running backs will definitely learn how to do that.
It's incredibly easy to make it look as if you were tackled with a hip drop tackle. And so that's how precarious this situation is. That this is how close we are.
Well, you have the burping the quarterback too, which is the most ridiculous sack penalty. The burping the quarterback. Like, I tackled a guy and I landed on him. This is football. You land on people when you tackle them.
No, I think it's terrible. I think it's even worse in college where you can get kicked out of a game I mean, it's unbelievable.
You get kicked out of a game for targeting, but not a single running back who does this through the hole every single time ever gets called for it. Every running back that you see at every level drops their head, which you're taught not to, and they never get called. I think I saw it called once last year.
Here's a part of this. Here's a part of this that I've never heard anyone address. Bob Costas is a big anti-concussion guy. He's very much a proponent of the wussification of the National Football League, although he wouldn't put it that way. I'm supposed to interview him again at some point in the summer, and I intend to bring this topic up.
So you have to be more nice, John, if you want that interview. Be more nice.
No, I mean, Bob and I have a fairly unique relationship. I mean, I think we do anyway. But here's the thing. Here's what I would love, whether it's Bob or somebody else, to address. And this is a little bit like the climate change, global warming argument. So we were told, right? We've been told for 20, 30 years that the globe is warming. And now we're 20, 30 years down the road, and we're not really seeing any actual impact of this, which should make a rational person go, well, wait a minute, maybe you were wrong. Well, similarly, we were told for now over a decade that, oh my gosh, concussions are going to turn your brain to mush. Football is incredibly dangerous.
Every football player is getting CTE eventually.
Right.
That's what we're told.
And the whole CTE thing, from a science perspective, is inherently problematic because the only people getting tested for CTE are those that were suspected of having CTE. And you only get tested after you're dead.
There's no control scan.
There's no control
at all.
But here's what I would love someone to address. And I don't know if you guys have ever thought about this. Go through the all-time NFL leaders for being sacked as quarterback, right? So, I mean, and these are all guys because, in order to get sacked enough times, almost all of them played in the 60s, 70s, 80s, and 90s, okay? Yeah. So go through that list of the most sacked quarterbacks in NFL history, and you will find that almost all of them are still very much alive, doing exceedingly well. Most of them are in broadcasting of some level. The only prominent quarterback from that era, which was clearly the most brutal era, the 60s, 70s, 80s, and 90s, the only quarterback who had any cognitive problems whatsoever was Bart Starr. And as an elderly man, he had dementia. We have no way of knowing if that's because of football or what have you. But there is not one other. In fact, I think you could argue that the quarterbacks of that era have done exceedingly well when it comes to the issue of living and being very well from a cognitive perspective. Archie Manning, by the way, who is now extremely old, is sharp as a tack.
I've interviewed Gus Farrat. Gus Farrat took a friggin' beating in his career.
How is Ron Jaworski not a vegetable? My God, after what LT did to him for all those years in Philadelphia. Fran Tarkington, Roger Staubach, Terry Bradshaw, who got the piss beaten out of him.
Steve Young and Troy Aikman. How many concussions did those two have? And we were told like one more and their brain scrambled.
Exactly. I mean, Joe Montana, Steve Young, they're all doing exceedingly well. So it doesn't disprove that CTE is a major problem, but I feel like it deserves an explanation.
Well,
because
John,
if we're trying to protect the quarterback, what are we protecting the quarterback from? We have an extraordinary amount of data now that quarterbacks that survived the most dangerous era in NFL history have done exceedingly well. I have a theory that a lot of these CTE cases, And I'm not denying that there's damage to the brain done by
course.
concussions, okay?
Mhm.
But a lot of these CTE issues where you have someone has great emotional problems, and their life falls apart, and you're looking for an excuse or a blame, something to blame, and so you blame football and CTE. And I'm not saying it's not a factor.
Of course it is.
One of the reasons why I find the quarterback position to be very interesting is if you are one of the top quarterbacks of the 60s, 70s, and 80s and 90s, guess what? You are living a very nice life. You have you are still getting a lot of attention after your career is over, especially if you're in the Hall of Fame. Everywhere you go, people know who you are.
Yes.
You don't have major economic problems.
Mhm.
And the thrill of the sport is still with you to a certain degree.
Yes.
A lot of these cases, most prominently, other than Junior Seau, who was a star player and ended up killing himself, which I think Junior Seau totally changed the league single-handedly. I think that scared the shit out of everybody.
100%.
That a player of his stature would kill themselves and have CTE. But if you take Junior Seau out of the equation, I think a lot of these guys, it's interesting, because there was a movie called Concussion starring Will Smith that was essentially about the 1970 Steelers.
Told the truth.
And I was very close to Franco Harris before he
Yes.
died because of my
Yes.
work in the Penn State case. And Franco was very, very concerned about this issue because he saw a lot of his teammates, he believed, have their lives negatively impacted by this. But I said to Franco, Franco, why not you? Why not Bradshaw? Why not Rocky Blyer? Why not Lynn Swann or John Stallworth? Why was it the guys that weren't the stars? And my theory is those guys are living a completely different life. They go from winning 4 Super Bowls in an era where you didn't make a lot of money, and now all of a sudden the cheering stops. You have to go to a normal life. You have to get a job.
You're back to being an average person.
You're an average person now with 4 Super Bowl rings. You don't get invited to all the great parties. Your life is completely different than the life of Franco Harris and all the other stars from that team. And I'm not saying that that's the full total reason why this happens, but that is a hell of an adjustment to have to make, to go from that level of life at its ultimate to crash landing. I'm sorry, there's going to be emotional problems that might be ancillary to the issue of concussions or how violent football is. And so that's why I find that list of all-time leading sack, the quarterbacks that have been sacked the most in the NFL to be quite interesting.
Yes.
And I think also a factor that I've always brought up, and Dave knows about this, is I think all the safety equipment is actually making the game more dangerous. Because if you tell the best athletes in the world that they can cut corners and still be safe, they're all going to do it. And you see it. DBs can't tackle. They all tackle with their heads. Line play is fucking terrible. It's at the worst it's ever been on the offensive line because they have no true fundamental form. None of them put their hand in the dirt anymore. They're all in the 2-point stance. And so you're seeing it all, and they're wearing these stupid the
Guardians caps,
the Guardian caps, and
oh my God.
I look at
Don't
all
get
of
me
it,
started
and
on
I'm
Guardian cap. Guardian cap is the dumbest thing I've ever seen in my life, other than the COVID mask, and they're very similar.
Yeah, they are.
If you make it less safe, guys will start using form again. They will, because they don't want to get hurt. People will start playing better again, and they'll do it more. But
there is a theory that if you got rid of the helmet, the game would actually be safer.
100%.
I'm not sure if that's true.
Well, look at rugby and look at Aussie rules football. I don't think you see half the issues that we have because those guys, they're physical. They hit the shit out of each other, but they're all trying to hit with form because they don't want to hurt themselves. And essentially, you're not trying to hurt the other player. You're trying, if you hurt them, you hurt them legally. But
the helmet is such an iconic part of the uniform that you couldn't get rid of it, I don't think.
Yeah.
Although they may destroy it with the Guardian cap, which is just insane.
At least put the logos on. I didn't mind the Guardian caps with the logos on them. At least I hate the stupid, completely different color ones that cover the helmet.
I still don't like them. It looks like you just stuffed it full of foam.
I hate them, but I would at least take a logo. If you're
I hope so. I hope the Guardian cap goes down hard so bad.
People are already saying it's stupid. There's players already talking out against
it. No, I think there's a good chance that it goes the way of the COVID mask, and that eventually no one is really using it because they are incredibly similar in so many ways. But I do think that the equipment, the helmet is certainly a hell of a lot safer today than it was in 1970.
Yes.
I mean, those 1970 helmets
damn
were
safe.
They were just
a joke. I mean, they were
like
probably-
hard plastic.
I mean, that was insane. So, but look, it actually pains me to watch football these days because I'm constantly, not only am I disgusted by how soft it is, but especially college football, I am constantly on edge that someone's going to get kicked out of the game for making a great play. I hate that feeling.
Yes.
I hate that feeling.
You lose your best safety because he jars the ball out on a good hit, and they determine that the receiver who changed his level was now vulnerable.
It's a shame that there's so many safeties, there's so many defensive players that we laud as some of the best ever that could never play in today's game because they would get penalized to high hell.
Oh,
Lawrence Taylor could never play today.
So one of the things that drives me crazy too, John, and I don't know what to do about this. How many times does Josh Allen, Patty Mahomes, Lamar use the sideline and kind of start slowing up and then just bolt and go? And you have guys that are trained. Like, I know people get mad when their defensive back goes and just destroys somebody. Well, they just go and destroy someone on the sideline and get a penalty. I would rather have them do that than let Josh Allen kind of slow up a little and then bolt up the sideline. It's not even a fake slide. It's the fake giving themselves up.
I couldn't agree more. The fake slide and the fake going out of bounds ought to be ought to be an extreme penalty.
Yes. Down 15 yards. It should be
now, but how do you enforce it though? It's a very difficult thing to discern. But to me, it's a lot like what we were talking about with the hip drop tackle. They're always going to take advantage of the rules. And the part of this that that really offends me the most is, Patrick Mahomes especially gets so much credit for scampering around and avoiding tackles and all that. And I'm like, when Roger Staubach and Fran Tarkington did it, they had a full-on expectation that if they didn't get themselves the hell out of bounds, they were going to get plastered. They were going to get plastered. They ran with fear and legitimate fear. Patrick Mahomes prances around like he's hoping to get hit. So that someone will get a penalty.
Don't get me started on the fact that the Kansas City Chiefs also never hold. And that there's certain teams that never hold, and that Patrick Mahomes can have 5 seconds back there, 2 out of the 3 downs, and they never get a holding penalty. But you have the Browns. Browns made a good play penalty. Jets made a good play penalty. Like, those exist. There's shit teams that you're not allowed to make a good play unless you have a good player on your team. Like, it baffles me. Ben Roethlisberger got this all the time. Ben Roethlisberger, the Steelers had the most holding in the NFL. They were just never called because there's no possible way Ben had those pockets the way he had for his years, unless every single Steelers offensive lineman is the best offensive lineman to ever play their position. I fucking hate the NFL. I hate it so much. I'm going to give you a last word on topic, John.
On this topic? Well,
yes.
I'm saddened by the place where I think football is going, and the NFL has been captured by wokeism. I think that you mentioned the Chiefs. I think that the whole Taylor Swift issue was very misunderstood by her defenders in the media. There were a lot of people in the media that wanted to defend her because obviously she has a lot of fans, and if you defend her, you appeal to her fans.
Yes.
The reason why the hardcore football fan was concerned about the catering to Taylor Swift and the Chiefs is that when you bring in this new fan base that doesn't understand the sport, that's almost overwhelmingly female, that you're now invested in keeping them in the game. And now you're appealing to people that don't know football,
don't like it.
And it actually helps with the whole wussification of the game because they're not into the whole violence aspect of it. They're perfectly fine with it being wussified. And so that to me was the missed portion of the Taylor Swift issue. I thought it was a much more serious issue than a lot of the sports media made it out to be. Nate Burleson on CBS, did a viral attack on those who questioned why Taylor Swift was part of the
Nate Burleson
NFL
tries so hard
video.
to be Stephen A. Smith, and he's just not good at it. Okay,
I agree, but this to me, Taylor Swift was a seminal moment in the NFL, and it showed that the NFL will sell out the sport in numerous ways
Yes.
to get a sliver of a new demographic because, in this economic environment, growth is everything. They don't give a shit about how much profit you make. It's about growth. And Taylor Swift allowed growth for the NFL ratings in an era where no ratings were growing. And so they sold out to the Taylor Swift contingent. And I don't think it helps the sport at all. And I just wish there was something about sports where I could point to and go, that's headed in the right direction. I'm optimistic about that. That's going to be great in the future. And I don't see it, unfortunately. So on that happy note, I appreciate the time, guys.
That is a great note to have you on. So, John, we appreciate you having you on, man. You're like I said, and I mean it. And I've said this before. I've said it without you on the show. Like we've talked about, things you brought up. Whether you disagree or don't disagree with John Ziegler, you're one of the more honest people I have ever seen that is a public figure, a legitimate public figure. You don't give a flying fuck about what anybody thinks. You're not afraid to be wrong because we didn't really talk politics here. Me and you vehemently disagree on most things Donald Trump. And you're not a Trump fan. You dislike the man. But you are not someone who will let your hate disguise it. When Trump does something good, you're on there saying, listen, this is a Trump win. This is a good thing.
That's true.
When you think Trump does something bad, you're going to say he's an idiot. And, in your own way, but probably saying it that way too, because you're nice and brash. But you're honest. And that's one thing I can always take from you. And that is I think the highest compliment you can get in this day and age, that you are honest in a day and age where grifting is just period what everybody does. That word is so overblown, but it's because what all media has become, whether it's conservative, leftist, it doesn't matter. Everyone just kind of goes where the wind blows. And you're someone who doesn't do that, which is why I completely and totally respect you and all the work you do.
Yes, that's very much appreciated. Very much appreciated, guys. I thank you so much. I wish there were more people that understood that, but I do believe it's true, and I very much appreciate it.
Yeah. So once again, go over on his X over at Sigmund Freud, which is a very apt handle because Sigmund Freud, you are very philosophical and predicting things and all that. So really good. Go to the Death of Journalism. Subscribe if you have not. Pay for his service, damn it, because John deserves the money. He's fantastic at what he does. If you want to hear different perspectives and things like that, John provides them, and if you liked hearing the inklings that you were getting today and the predictions and things like that, you're gonna really enjoy what he does. And also go to With the Benefit of Hindsight. Go listen from the beginning. Find out the truth about the Sandusky trial, and regardless of what your thought process going in is. Even like I said, even if you don't walk away saying he's fully not guilty, you will have so many more questions about what's going on. And a lot of them answered there, but still a ton of questions. And it's fun listening to John get significantly angry with the whole Sandusky clan and then eventually making up and getting angry and making up. That goes on all the time. But once again, it's lots of fun to talk to you. We appreciate you coming back on now 3 years later. And just the fact that, you're still willing to. We love it.
Anytime, guys. Take care. Keep in touch.
Thank you so much.
So you can find us, anywhere you can, the Alex Questa Show. We're over there. We'll be back next week. Thank you, everyone, for watching. Do all your due diligence.
Sure, caveat. I don't think so. Sorry. I just want to make sure I answer his question. Can I review
any
documentary?
No, because it's not you were a documentary filmmaker too, right? You did a few documentaries.
I have done 3 different documentaries.
There you go.
If you go and search John Ziegler's
might be able to
name,
find him on Criticless.
So real quick, John, Criticless is a spot that was created by this guy, Blaine Andrews, and it's supposed to be an answer to Rotten Tomatoes. It is an answer to Rotten Tomatoes, where users go on, they put their own reviews out there, and it kind of gets the social aspect as well. You can comment, you can rate. It's really cool. So if you like TV or movies, definitely go make a Criticless and go leave reviews. It's actually a good time to do. But